Hi, I'm Linnea, and while I was managing billion-dollar projects overseas, my parents sold my house behind my back. Not just the house, my entire life. They drained $57 million from my accounts and handed it all to my sister, the one who never worked a day in her life. When I came home, they were standing on the porch, laughing. My mother looked me in the eyes and said, "You're useless. Your sister was the better investment." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just smiled and said, "Then let me tell you something. That house you sold was actually worth. What would you do if your own family betrayed you like that? Would you walk away or burn it all down?" Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this? And where from? Drop it in the comments below. The heat settled on my skin the moment I stepped out of the rideshare, thick and heavy, the way late summer evenings always felt in College Station. I stood at the edge of the driveway with my suitcase beside me, letting my eyes adjust to the fading light. 18 months overseas, and this was the moment I had pictured on every long night. Coming home, seeing familiar faces, maybe hearing my mother call my name the way she used to when dinner was ready. Instead, I heard laughter, loud, carefree, almost rehearsed. My parents and my sister were gathered on the front porch, leaning into each other like they'd just heard the funniest joke of their lives. For a second, I thought maybe they hadn't seen me. But then Raina lifted her head, caught my eye, and her smile tightened just a little. The way someone looks when an unwelcome guest shows up. I shifted the weight of my carry-on and felt the cool edge of the spare house key inside my pocket. Dad had given it to me years ago, telling me, "Anytime you come home, honey, you use this. This place is yours as much as ours." I had held onto it through 3 continents and more airports than I could count. Tonight, it felt strangely small in my palm. I took a few steps toward the porch. No one moved, no hugs, no "welcome back," not even a half-hearted wave. They just stared at me the way neighbors stare at noise they don't recognize. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just got in." Raina looked me over like she was checking for flaws in a product. Well, that was fast. Fast? I'd been gone a year and a half. Mom's face was unreadable. She always had that talent. One raised brow and the whole room would crumble. Tonight she didn't even bother with the brow. She just crossed her arms and waited for me to come the rest of the way, as if she were doing me a favor by being there at all. I stopped at the bottom of the steps, trying to read the air. Something was off. Not just the coldness. That wasn't new. This felt heavier. Like they'd been talking about me right before I arrived. Like I'd walked in on a secret meeting. Dad cleared his throat, but didn't stand. He always stood when I came home before. Even if I came back at 2 a.m. from college, he'd shuffle out to greet me. Tonight, he looked everywhere except at my face. Mom muttered to him, "Perfect timing." Then Dad, too loud, "She has no idea." The laughter that followed wasn't warm. It wasn't even human. It was mocking. It was the kind of laugh people use when they know they're safe from consequences. My stomach tightened. I set my bag down on the concrete. "What's going on?" Mom shrugged like it was nothing. "We made some changes while you were gone." Changes? My eyes drifted to the window. The curtains were different. Boxes were stacked near the hallway. A new light fixture glowed above the porch. I'd never seen it before. Something deep in my chest started to sink. "What changes?" I asked. Silence. Then Raina smiled, a slow curve that didn't reach her eyes. Mom finally said, "You're useless. Investing in your sister is worth more." I don't know what I expected her to say, but not that. The words landed so hard I felt the impact in my shoulders. She didn't flinch, didn't soften. She said it like she'd been waiting a long time for the chance. Dad looked at the ground. That hurt more than the sentence. I had heard my mother criticize me before, I had heard her praise Raina for things she never accomplished. But this was different. This was a line drawn in permanent ink. I swallowed, the taste of jet lag and dust mixing with something bitter. I wasn't angry yet, not exactly. It was more like a slow burn, a spark that had been waiting for oxygen. My gaze drifted to the driveway. A dark SUV I didn't recognize was parked in my usual spot. A stack of flattened cardboard boxes leaned against the trash can. Through the window, I could see empty spaces where my things should have been. Something clicked, something obvious and still impossible to accept. I looked back at the 3 people who were supposed to be my family. They stared at me like I was standing on land that no longer belonged to me. I lifted my chin, forcing my voice steady. "Is that so?" Mom shifted, maybe surprised I wasn't crying. Raina's smirk faltered. I pulled in a slow breath and let a smile form. Not the warm one I'd practiced overseas when strangers asked where home was, but the cold one I saved for moments when I needed to survive. "Well," I said quietly, "if that's how you feel, then let me tell you something." For the first time all evening, their confidence thinned. They exchanged quick glances, small flickers of worry. They had no idea what was coming, and they didn't know that quiet people don't miss much. We store things. We remember. "Then let me tell you something." I stepped past the threshold before finishing the sentence. The air inside the house felt stale, like it hadn't been lived in properly. Or maybe it was just my memory fighting with the present. I scanned the room quickly, catching changes I didn't expect. The rug I'd chosen from Morocco gone, my framed photos missing, furniture rearranged to match someone else's preferences. Before I could speak again, my mother raised a hand like a traffic cop. "Sit down, we need to talk." That tone, low, final, rehearsed, wasn't an invitation. It was the kind of command that came after a decision had already been made. I knew it well. Every "we need to talk" in my family came with an agenda and zero room for input. I stayed standing. The ceiling fan above ticked quietly, slow and unbothered. The light bulbs cast a dull yellow that made the entire room feel dim and narrow. On the coffee table were neatly stacked papers, a manila folder, and an open laptop. Raina was already seated, legs crossed, arms folded, her phone face down on her thigh, like even it had been instructed to behave. Dad was by the window, pretending to adjust the blinds that didn't need adjusting. I set my luggage by the door. The spare key remained in my hand, pressed into my palm so tight it was leaving a mark. Mom gestured again. "Please." I sat, not out of respect, but because I needed to know just how deep this went. "You've been gone a long time," she began. "We didn't think you were coming back. I told you I'd be back by fall." "Well, plans change." She slid the folder across the table. I didn't touch it. "We sold the house," she said, like she was announcing the weather. "It was the smartest thing to do." I blinked, not sure I heard her right. "You sold my house?" Raina let out a short laugh. "You weren't using it. Why let it rot?" Rot. I had picked that lot myself. Oversaw every beam, every tile, every window. I worked double shifts for years to afford that place. It was my anchor, my proof that all those nights overseas, eating alone, sleeping in hard beds, managing impossible timelines, meant something. "You had no right," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Dad mumbled, "We thought you'd understand." It wasn't guilt, it was defense. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. I stared at the folder, then back at them. "When did this happen?" "Months ago," Mom answered, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. I was still trying to wrap my head around it when she opened the laptop. On the screen was a bank interface. My name was still on the account. The numbers didn't make sense. Then they did. Page after page of withdrawals, Wire transfers. Debit lines I never approved. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "We invested everything into Raina's business," Mom said, voice smooth, steady. "$57 million, every cent." I looked at Raina, who didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. "That was my retirement, my entire savings." Mom shrugged. "Your sister has potential. You just don't. We made the right call." There it was. Not just the betrayal, but the belief. They didn't think I deserved the life I built. In their eyes, Raina was the future. I was just the worker bee who brought in honey and stayed out of the way. I sat back slowly, keeping my expression flat. I felt the burn in my chest, the sting behind my eyes, but I didn't let it spill. They didn't get to see that part of me. I remembered working on a bridge project in Indonesia, soaked in monsoon rain, eating rice from a plastic bag while drawing out schematics under a tarp. I remembered dialing home during time zones that made no sense, only to hear, "We'll call you back. We're busy right now." They weren't busy. They were planning. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "When did you move Raina into my home?" Raina smiled like a cat stretching on a windowsill. "It's been months. Honestly, it's better now. You always kept the place so sterile." That was by design. I liked order. It kept me sane. They didn't just sell the house. They erased me from it before the deal even closed. This wasn't spontaneous. It was coordinated. Every call ignored, every vague answer, every document I didn't get. It was a plan, carried out piece by piece, while I was halfway across the world trusting them. I straightened my back. "I see," I said. No inflection, no drama, just precision. Mom's lips twitched. "Good, then act like part of this family and don't make a scene." I met her eyes directly for the first time that evening. "I won't make a scene." A pause. Their shoulders eased. I leaned in, voice low, even. "But I will make things clear." The room went quiet. Raina's smirk faltered. Dad finally turned away from the blinds. They knew something had shifted. They just didn't know how far I was willing to go. "I won't make a scene, but I will make things clear." With that, I turned and walked away, past the tension in the room, past their stares that felt more like walls than windows. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. I just moved through the hallway like someone looking for air, carrying a silence so sharp it could slice through stone. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, focused. But my chest, it ached. That old familiar ache. The one I used to get as a kid, right before I spoke up, only to be told to sit down, stay quiet, let Raina finish. Funny how some things never change, no matter how far you fly. My footsteps were soft, but in that house they sounded louder than I remembered. The hallway walls looked the same on the surface, but the pictures hanging on them weren't mine. Family photos, yes, but ones where I was cropped to the edge, if not missing altogether. In one, Raina beamed in her graduation cap. The frame was twice the size of the others. My own college photo, gone. I looked for the small framed article about my first international architecture project. Vanished. I reached my old bedroom door. My hand paused on the knob, just for a second. I guess I thought maybe, just maybe, something familiar would still be there. Maybe they'd left one part of me untouched. I opened it, and it hit like a slap. Soft, blush-colored sheets. A vanity with glowing bulbs around the mirror. Shelves lined with skincare products and designer shoes. A rack of clothes still with tags. A pink ring light leaned against the corner. This wasn't a bedroom, it was Raina's content studio. My jaw clenched. The air felt thinner here. I didn't see my desk, my books, the prints I'd collected from all the places I'd lived. Tokyo, Istanbul, Santiago. They were gone. Every trace of me was scrubbed clean like I'd never existed. They erased me! I said it out loud, almost in disbelief. The sound of my voice cracked, and I had to blink fast. Not here, not now. I moved across the room, yanking open drawers. Empty. I checked the closet, bare except for a couple of empty hangers and a box in the corner labeled Misk. I dropped to my knees and opened it. Inside, an old hoodie with a coffee stain, a broken wristwatch, and a ripped sketchbook. Stuff I hadn't used in years, but I never would have tossed it. I sat back, staring at the pieces like they belonged to someone else. There was no care, no dignity, just disposal. A sharp breath escaped before I could catch it. This wasn't about a house anymore. It wasn't about money. It was about being discarded, forgotten. That's when the memories started crawling back. Age 10. I'd won first place in a school art contest. Held the certificate out proudly at dinner. Mom had smiled, nodded, then turned to Raina and said, "Tell us about your dance recital." Age 15. Accepted into a gifted STEM program. Dad barely reacted. "We need to focus on Raina right now. She's struggling in chemistry." Age 28. I signed the deed to this very house, paid for in full. When neighbors came over, Mom said, "We're so proud. We all worked hard for this home." But she never put a dime into it. I never corrected her, because I was trained not to. The realization settled heavy on my shoulders. I'd spent most of my life shrinking so they could feel bigger. I played small so they could shine. And the moment I left, they took everything. All I wanted now was my memory box. A small wooden box, no larger than a shoebox, stained cherry brown. My grandmother had given it to me when I turned 13. She was the only one in the family who ever saw me, really saw me. Inside were things I didn't trust the world with. Sketches from when I first dreamed of being an architect, letters from her, a worn photo of us at the county fair, and a little silver charm shaped like a key. "For when you find a door no one wants you to walk through," she had said. I tore through the room, under the bed, behind the curtain, in the closet again. Nothing. Then I heard her. Raina. Standing in the doorway, arms folded, smile smug. "If you're looking for that ratty little box," she said, "I tossed it. Looked like junk." My breath caught. She didn't flinch. "You're welcome," she added, before turning to leave. For a moment I couldn't move. I think a part of me broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly, quietly. The kind of break you don't glue back together. I closed my eyes and heard my grandmother's voice again. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means you see what others think you'll ignore. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, turned toward Raina without even raising my voice. "You had no right," she laughed. "Oh, please, you always overreact." But behind her smugness, I saw something else. A flicker, a flash of fear. She didn't know what I'd do next, and that was the beginning. I walked past her, back down the hallway, through the stale scent of betrayal and the weight of every silent moment I'd let slide. As I reached the living room again, my voice came out like glass, clear, sharp, and not asking for permission. "I'm done searching for what you took." I paused. "Now I'm going to take back what you owe." For the first time since I stepped off that plane, the entire house fell silent. The second I stepped back into the living room, the air felt heavier, almost like it was bracing for what came next. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low, steady, like a warning. Mom didn't even look up before she said, "Are you finished throwing your little tantrum?" I stopped in the doorway. "I haven't even started." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't respond. I walked toward the couch slowly, deliberately, and sat. Not because they told me to, but because I wanted them to see I wasn't afraid to take up space anymore. Raina was sprawled on the armchair like it was a throne, her leg crossed high, her fingers toying with her phone. My father sat on the edge of the love seat, elbows on his knees, looking everywhere but at me. The ceiling fan hummed overhead. The air was thick with heat and history. Dad cleared his throat. We needed to organize things while you were gone. I tilted my head, not breaking eye contact. You organized my life without me. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom sighed like she was already tired of the conversation. You were overseas, she said flatly. It wasn't like you were reachable. I worked. I built a career. I supported you all financially for years. But unreachable? I shook my head. No, you didn't want to reach me. She gave a dry laugh, then reached under the coffee table and pulled out a thick folder. The kind you use for taxes or estate plans. She pushed it across the table with one finger. We had to move your legal documents into Raina's care, she said, as if she were explaining something tedious. For safekeeping. My fingers froze as I opened it. Inside were copies of my house deed, power of attorney forms, a full summary of my bank holdings. These were in my safe, I said, voice thin. That code was mine alone. Raina looked smug. You really think no one else figured it out? Come on, Lynn. You used your college graduation date, not exactly Fort Knox. I felt something inside me tighten. They hadn't just disrespected my space. They invaded it, undid it, stole it. I looked straight at my dad. You broke into my private safe. He didn't answer, just stared at his shoes like they were going to save him. Mom jumped in. We did what was best for the family. I leaned back slightly. No, you did what was best for Raina. That struck a nerve. Her mouth thinned and she said, she's the one who can actually build something here. My fingers curled around the edge of the folder. Raina opened her laptop, the screen glowing against her face. Look, she said, your money didn't just vanish, it's being invested in something meaningful. She spun it toward me. The screen showed a business plan, complete with graphs, projections, even a mission statement. It looked polished, rehearsed, too polished. My eyes scanned it quickly. Initial capital, one line read, $57 million, my name next to it. Invoices followed, renovation payments, equipment purchases, marketing retainers. Everything had already been paid out of my accounts. You already spent it, Raina nodded, proud. It's all in motion now. We're gonna be big. I looked back at her. You're telling me this like I should be excited, she shrugged. Well, yeah. I mean, you weren't doing anything with it. I felt something cold rise in my throat. There were no words for that kind of arrogance or betrayal. I looked at my dad again. He just folded his hands tighter. Then he slid a single paper toward me. No folder this time, just one page. What's this? Authorization, he said. You signed this. We used it to initiate the transfer. I looked down, recognized the layout, the font, but not the signature. That wasn't my handwriting. It was my name, but crooked, awkward, the tail of the L in my last name curved in a way I never wrote it. That's not my signature. My mom leaned back, arms crossed. It doesn't matter. The bank accepted it. Silence. And then it all clicked. They hadn't just crossed a line. They forged my name, lied to a financial institution, committed fraud. The temperature in the room didn't change, but I felt ice settle in my bones. I stood slowly, eyes on each of them. You stole from me, I said, quiet but precise. You forged my name. You sold my home. Dad flinched. Mom didn't. Raina let out a dry laugh. What are you gonna do? Cry? Run back overseas? Send a strongly worded email? I took a step toward her. No, I'm going to show you I'm not the quiet girl you think I am. She scoffed again, but I saw it, just a flicker in her eyes. fear. Without another word, I walked out of the room, down the hallway, and pulled open the front door. The storm outside had grown louder. Thunder cracked across the sky, and wind swept warm rain across the porch. But I didn't flinch, because that was the moment I stopped being part of their story and started writing my own. I'm going to show you I'm not the quiet girl you think I am. I pulled the front door open and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp, honest. I stood still for a second, just letting the chill seep through my clothes, settle into my skin, cut through the fog in my head. The porch light flickered slightly above me, casting long shadows onto the sidewalk. Rain hadn't started yet, but the clouds were thick, bloated with tension, same as my chest. I sat down on the top step and wrapped my arms around myself. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I curled my fingers tighter, tried to press them into stillness, but it was no use. Everything inside me was shaking. I thought I understood what they were capable of. I thought I had a handle on it. Years of side comments, of being invisible in my own house, of hearing Raina's name said with more warmth than mine ever was. But this was something else. You're useless. That voice, my mother's. I could still hear it, clear as glass, cold as the air around me. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that I'd misheard, that I was just overtired, jet-lagged, raw from everything. But no, I'd seen the way she looked at me when she said it. There was no mistake. I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch. 5 minutes, maybe 10. I don't know. I sat there long enough for my breathing to slow, though the ache in my chest stayed put. Eventually, I stood up. My legs were stiff, my back tight. I walked back inside and shut the door behind me. The warmth of the house hit me, but it didn't settle. It felt like I was stepping into a stranger's living room. They were still there. Mom on one couch, legs crossed, scrolling her phone. Dad sipping tea, like he didn't just help dismantle my life. Raina, of course, still on her throne. My father looked up first. Ready to be rational now? I didn't answer. I walked past them and sat on the other couch, as far from them as the room allowed. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were stiff but steady enough. I opened my banking app. The screen loaded, and I forgot how to breathe. The checking account was empty. Not low, empty. Savings gone. Every portfolio I had spent years building drained. Each transaction detailed in dry, surgical text, transfer completed, authorization verified, destination account confirmed. All routed into business accounts, all tied to Raina's venture. I looked up, my voice barely audible. You took all of it. Raina didn't even flinch. It's just money. I stared at her, waiting for something. Remorse, shame, anything. She gave me nothing. I lowered my head. My hands rested in my lap. 20 years. I gave up birthdays. I missed weddings. I said no to every impulse so I could say yes to responsibility. Every dollar in those accounts was a sacrifice. A lonely hotel room. A night working when I should have been resting. I wasn't crying, but I was grieving. Something sacred had been violated. Dad misread the silence completely. You should be proud. Your contribution gave your sister a real chance. Proud. That word burned. Then Mom, as if this were the moment she'd been waiting for, said clearly, Raina deserves the future more than you do. She's the face of this family. I couldn't respond. My body felt too heavy, like I was sinking slowly into myself. This wasn't new. It had always been like this. A memory bubbled up, age 17. I'd just gotten accepted into a selective STEM program. I brought home the letter, beaming, practically glowing with hope. My mom glanced at it and said, Don't brag, it's not polite. That same week, Raina got a participation ribbon for some school event. We threw her a party. I clapped for my sister with a smile on my face and a lump in my throat. Back in the present, something dropped from Raina's binder. A piece of paper skidded across the floor and landed near my foot. I picked it up, a page from a financial projection spreadsheet. It showed red, losses, negative margins, expected revenue that hadn't materialized. The business they destroyed me for was already bleeding. "You stole everything," I whispered, "for something that won't even survive 6 months." Raina snatched the paper from my hands. "You don't understand business." "No," I said, "but I understand betrayal." My phone buzzed, more than once. I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. Notifications from Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Raina had posted a photo of herself holding a glass of wine with the caption, "Sometimes you have to take control when others can't keep up. Some people in this family only hold us back. Thankfully, I made the hard decisions." The comments were already pouring in. "So true. You're the strong one, Raina." "She's always been the weak link." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my chest ached. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Public, loud, and irreversible. I stood slowly, my knees wobbled. "I need air," I said, barely above a whisper. No one stopped me. No one followed. I walked to the guest room, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. I wasn't angry anymore. I was emptied out, hollowed, like something inside me had cracked, and I wasn't sure if it could be put back together. Outside, thunder rumbled again, a slow warning. I stared out the window into the darkness and whispered to no one. They have no idea what they've awakened. That was the last thing I whispered to myself before sleep finally dragged me under for a couple of exhausted hours. When morning light crept through the blinds, it was thin and cold, the kind that made everything look washed out. My eyes felt gritty, but my mind, strangely steady. Grief had settled into something sharper, a kind of quiet clarity I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I got up, splashed water on my face in the bathroom, and walked toward the kitchen. Every step felt deliberate, like my body knew I wasn't the same woman who walked into this house last night. As soon as I stepped into the kitchen, the room shifted. Conversations cut off, chairs creaked. My parents and Raina looked at me the way people look at a storm forming across the field. My mother was the first to speak, stirring her coffee with a slow, patronizing rhythm. "You should calm down before you embarrass yourself." I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and answered flatly, "Where are the documents?" Raina let out a small laugh under her breath, pretending she didn't know what I meant. "What documents?" I didn't bother arguing. I turned and walked toward the small desk in the hallway where they'd left piles of paperwork last night. My fingers moved quickly, flipping through folders until something caught my eye. A set of forms clipped neatly together. I pulled them out. My heartbeat slowed in a strange, icy way as I flipped through the pages. Authorization transfers, capital releases, investment redirections, even property-related forms, all with my signature, my handwriting, my looping L, my angled N, except it wasn't mine. A thin line of cold ran down my spine. They didn't just betray me, they became me. I walked back to the kitchen and placed the documents on the table in front of them, one by one, quiet, precise. My father's shoulders tightened. My mother stopped stirring her coffee. Raina didn't even bother to hide her smirk. "You're being dramatic," she said. I tapped one of the forged signatures. "These are felonies." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. I just stated the truth. My mother slammed her mug down. "If you report us, we will tell everyone you abandoned the family." My father chimed in, as if rehearsed. "And we'll remove you from the trust entirely." Raina leaned back in her chair. "You already lost the house. Losing the family shouldn't matter." The cruelty wasn't new. But hearing it said aloud, so boldly, so casually, cracked something inside me. I straightened my posture. I realized a long time ago, I said quietly, that I never had a family to lose. None of them spoke. I stepped outside onto the back porch. The air was cold enough to sting, but it cleared my head. I pulled out my phone and dialed my international attorney. The call went to voicemail, and I kept my message simple. Activate the file, all of it. No details, no explanations. But the system I'd put in place overseas was now in motion. I hung up and leaned against the railing, letting the chill settle in my bones. Then I heard a voice behind the fence. "Miss Linnea?" I turned. Jonah, the neighbor's boy, peeked at me from under the fence slats. He looked uneasy, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure if he should speak. I stepped closer. "Hey, Jonah, you okay?" He nodded, then shook his head. I think I need to tell you something." His voice was small, but the sincerity in his eyes pulled me in. "I saw people at your house a while ago," he said. "3 of them. They were taking boxes out. Big ones. I heard your sister yelling at the movers. She said, 'The idiot owner will never know.'" I inhaled slowly. "When was this?" "A few months ago, before summer." Months. They had been clearing out my home long before I even boarded the plane to come back. I knelt down to meet his gaze. "Thank you for telling me." He looked relieved, like he'd been carrying the truth too long. "You did the right thing." He nodded and slipped back into his yard. As I stood, something shifted inside me. All these years, people mistook my calm for weakness, my quiet for submission, my silence for acceptance. That assumption was the weapon they used on me. Now it was becoming mine. I walked back into the kitchen. My mother was mid-rant, complaining to my father about my attitude. I set my phone on the counter, screen down, recording. No dramatic flourish, just a smooth, natural placement, the kind you'd never question if you weren't paying attention. My mother continued without missing a beat. We had to forge half of those stupid papers because she wouldn't cooperate. My father huffed in agreement. I stopped the recording. A faint, controlled smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. That was the first domino. I picked up my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and looked directly at my mother. She paused, just for a moment, something uncertain flickering across her face. I kept my voice measured. "I think it's time you hear what I've been doing overseas." That shut them up. My mother's spoon paused midair. My father shifted in his chair. Raina let out a loud, dismissive laugh that bounced against the walls like a cracked plate. "Traveling doesn't make you important," she said. I didn't respond. I walked past her calmly, choosing the armchair across the room. The sunlight cut across the floor in a harsh stripe, slicing the space between us. They wanted a show. I gave them facts. "I worked in international architecture," I said, folding my hands together. "I led teams on multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects across Southeast Asia and North Africa. Every account I manage, personal or professional, is monitored through a cross-border compliance system tied to multiple jurisdictions." My mother blinked, pretending not to understand. I leaned in, quiet and sharp, which means every wire transfer from my name is auto-flagged. Every forged signature, already under international review. My father's arms slowly uncrossed. He didn't say a word, but his face twitched. Barely. Raina rolled her eyes. "Right. Billion-dollar whatnots. You always did love pretending to be someone you're not." I smiled. Not wide, not cruel. Just enough. "And you always thought I was pretending because you had no idea what real work looks like." They weren't scared yet, but they were off balance. Good. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, not bothering to excuse myself. I needed something, anything to break their rhythm. They'd built their lives on control, so I moved in a way they couldn't predict. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice grow hard. "You're lying. You always exaggerate your work." My father chimed in, louder this time. "You're making things worse with your paranoia." Then Raina, pulling out her phone with a triumphant sneer, pointed it at me. "I'm just recording your breakdown for when we need to show people what you've become." For a split second, I froze. Then I breathed in. They were going to play dirty. They were going to frame me as unstable, emotional, a mess. But I wasn't the girl who used to bite her tongue and excuse herself to cry in the bathroom. "You might want to stop recording," I said, walking slowly toward her. She tilted her head. "Make me." I didn't. I didn't need to. I turned instead toward the side drawer where old paperwork used to be stored. She didn't notice. None of them did. I opened it and reached to the very back. Buried under outdated mail and a dusty user manual for a microwave we no longer owned, I found a sealed manila envelope. I knew that handwriting. I pulled it out, peeled the flap, and slid out the papers inside. My breath caught. The house deed, transferred, stamped, dated, and my signature copied in the same perfect slant they'd practiced a dozen times now. I turned around, slowly, holding the document in my hands like something holy. "You stole everything I owned," I said, softly. "And you thought I wouldn't find this." My mother sat frozen. My father's eyes went straight to the envelope, like he was debating how fast he could grab it. Raina's face flushed, her jaw clenched tight. "You don't understand how these things work," my father muttered. "No," I said, my voice like glass. "You don't." Raina stood and took one step forward. Her tone jumped an octave. "That was legal. It was a family transfer. You were unreachable." "You forged my name," I said again. The tension cracked. Raina lunged at me. No warning, no build-up. Just sudden movement. Fingers out, face twisted, snatching for the envelope. Her hand hit the edge of the paper, ripping a corner. I didn't fight back. I stepped aside and let her momentum carry her forward. She stumbled, caught herself. And for the first time since I walked back into this house, she looked embarrassed. I looked at her, then looked at the torn page in my hand. "You just made everything easier for me." She froze, lips parted. My parents didn't move. I straightened the papers as best I could, then gathered them carefully. That was it. The moment the room changed. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need a final word or some clever parting line. I turned my back to all of them and started walking out. "I'm done talking," I said over my shoulder. "My next move won't be words." I didn't look back. I stepped out the front door, letting it close behind me. The air had turned colder. Heavy clouds crawled across the sky, thunder rumbling somewhere in the distance. It was fitting. A storm was overdue. I walked to the edge of the porch, pulled my phone from my coat pocket, and opened the secure app. My fingers moved steadily, no hesitation now. I whispered into the phone, "Activate the audit, full release." A soft chime confirmed the command, then a second ping, confirmation that international fraud protocols had been triggered, flags raised across financial networks spanning 3 countries. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, everything they thought would stay hidden was about to be hauled into daylight. "Quiet doesn't mean powerless," I said under my breath. "Quiet means prepared." I turned around and walked back into the house. They hadn't moved. My parents stood in the middle of the living room. Raina had slouched into the couch, arms crossed tightly, her mouth pulled into a sneer, but her foot tapped rapidly against the hardwood. My father was the first to speak. "What did you do?" "I stopped letting you take what wasn't yours." My mother pointed at me, voice sharp. "You brought outsiders into this? You'd humiliate your own family." "I already did," I said, "and you did that to yourselves." Almost on cue, my father's phone buzzed, then my mother's. Both froze. They looked down, their faces drained of color as they read the alerts. Pending investigations, multiple flagged transactions, legal advisory notices from both domestic and international agencies. Raina snatched the phones from their hands, scrolling rapidly. "What is this? This isn't real. This is... No, no!" Her voice cracked. My father tried to recover his posture, puffing his chest like he used to when I was a kid, and made a mistake. "You can't just ruin us like this," he said. "You wouldn't dare." "You already did that," I said calmly. My mother pleaded, "You can't destroy your family over money, over a house." I stepped closer, steady as stone. "You destroyed the family when you decided I wasn't part of it unless I stayed quiet." Then Raina stood up, trembling with rage. "You're trying to ruin everything I built." I laughed, just once, soft and real. "You didn't build anything. You stole it." She screamed, a guttural, wild sound, and lunged for my laptop bag near the entryway. She yanked it open and flung it across the room. Papers scattered everywhere. "You think you're better than me. You always did. Grandma loved you more." The room went still. The words hung in the air like smoke. There it was. Not just betrayal, not just theft, resentment, years of it, rotting her from the inside. She dove again, this time clawing for the title deed I still held. I stepped back just fast enough. Her fingers grazed the edge but didn't grip it. She lost her balance and stumbled into the wall. I stared at her, chest rising slowly. "You just proved everything I needed." I looked down at the papers in my hand, creased now, a little torn, but still whole. Then I turned to all three of them. "I'm done letting you rewrite my life." My father opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. For the first time, they listened. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said. "I came for the truth." I let that settle before lifting the document slightly. "That house you sold wasn't mine." Confusion. "What?" my mother asked, her voice small. I looked her in the eye. "I bought it under a federal protection program. It was co-owned with a government partner. You didn't just sell my house, you sold restricted federal property." My father's knees buckled slightly. He caught the edge of the couch to stay upright. My mother clamped a hand over her mouth. Raina froze. "And the investigation you just triggered?" I said. "It's not just financial, it's federal." The silence was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. And then I turned toward the door. "I suggest you all sit down." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Chapter 9 will not be kind to you." They didn't say a word, just stood there, stunned, staring at the door I just walked through. I stood still on the porch, breathing in the cold morning air. The storm had passed hours ago, but the sky was still a dull slate gray. The wind had settled. The streets were quiet. Still, the air felt heavier now, thick with everything that had just shifted. Sometimes the calm after a storm is louder than the storm itself. I leaned against the porch rail and let my thoughts settle. Inside, the house that used to be mine sat in silence. No more shouting, no more bargaining, just the slow crumble of illusions they'd clung to for too long. Then I heard it, my father's phone ringing again. I didn't need to see his face to know what was coming next. The call wasn't from me. It wasn't a bluff. It was a real-world consequence. One that couldn't be shouted down or guilted away. Through the thin front door, I could hear his voice falter. He didn't stand up. He slumped into the old chair by the fireplace, shoulders sagging like the truth had finally landed on his chest. My mother's voice followed, higher-pitched, almost shrill. "They don't know what they're talking about," she said. "They're just trying to scare us." I didn't go back in. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't need my voice. It stands on its own legs. A few minutes later, I got the confirmation. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I checked it. The review of the property sale had officially escalated. The agency I worked with overseas had filed a report. This wasn't family business anymore. I finally stepped inside, just long enough to collect the last of my things. A small duffel I'd left by the coat rack, a few folders, a winter coat, and in the corner of the room, wedged behind a half-packed box, a dusty photo frame. I bent down and picked it up. It was a picture of me, age 7, grinning with a popsicle at a summer fair. My mom had taken it. For a second, I stared at it longer than I meant to. That version of me still believed they'd always love her. That family was unconditional. I set the photo back into the box. I wasn't leaving because they hurt me. I was leaving because staying would teach them they were right to do it. I zipped the bag, turned to go, and paused. There was one last thing they needed to hear. I stood in the middle of the room and looked at each of them. None of them met my eyes. My father was staring at the floor. My mother gripped her phone like it was a lifeline. Raina stood with her arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they'd turned white. "I never came home for the money," I said. "I came for family." They didn't speak. "I never needed the $57 million, I continued. "I tripled it overseas. I'm not rich. I'm just not broken." My mother gasped. You have more?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Yes, but none of it matters anymore." My father suddenly stood, his voice full of false hope. "Well, then maybe you can help us fix this." That was it. That one sentence. That was the moment I knew. They weren't sorry. They were just scared. There it was. The truth I'd tried to outrun for years. They never saw me as a daughter, only as a resource. Raina walked over, chin high, but her voice had dropped low. "If you don't fix this," she whispered, "our business is going to collapse." She didn't say sorry. She didn't apologize for stealing, or lying, or standing by while the others tore me down. She just wanted out of trouble. I nodded once, quietly, fully understanding. They never wanted me, I thought. Only what I could give them. I turned to the door. "You sold my home," I said, "but you lost something bigger, the last chance to be in my life." No one followed me this time. No one begged. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Some exits aren't about drama. They're about dignity. Outside, the wind had picked up again. As I reached the porch steps, I noticed something glinting in the grass near the walkway. I bent down. It was a keychain. The same one Grandma had given me when I was a teenager. The one I kept tucked away in a drawer. I hadn't seen it in years. Back then, it had meant something different. It was a symbol of hope, of belonging. Now it was mine and mine alone. I held it in my hand, let my fingers close around it. "I kept this for them," I whispered. "Now I'll keep it for me." I got into my car and started the engine. The sky was beginning to lighten behind the hills, the first soft colors of morning stretching over the horizon. An hour later, I pulled into the driveway of my new place, a small condo tucked near the foothills. Simple, quiet, mine. I carried my bag inside and set the keychain on the windowsill above the sink. Some endings aren't loud. Some endings are just necessary. I made a cup of tea, curled into the chair near the window, and watched the light spill across the earth. Blood doesn't entitle people to your soul. Sometimes healing begins the moment you walk away.